Under the frost-kissed moon, a single snowflake traced the scar of forgotten blood, whispering of kin unbound by chains of scorn. Lyria's breath fogged the chill air as she knelt in the snow-dusted clearing, the pack's jeers echoing like distant thunder across the frozen pines. At 22, she had learned to fold her pain into silence, but tonight it clawed at her throat, raw and unyielding. The wind howled through the ancient forest, carrying the scent of pine resin and smoldering hearth fires from the village below, where the pack gathered under the guise of unity. Unity, they called it, yet for her it was a cage of mocking eyes and sharpened tongues. "Inútil," spat Mira, the beta whose laughter cut deeper than any claw. She circled Lyria like a shadow, her furred cloak dusted with fresh snow, eyes gleaming with the pack's shared disdain. "A sterile omega, burdening us with your weakness. What good are you, if not to warm a den you can't fill?" The others joined in, their voices a chorus of cruelty, alphas posturing with bared teeth, omegas whispering behind gloved hands. They had gathered for the lunar rite, the sacred marking of the pack's strength under the Deusa's watchful gaze. But Lyria was the offering they scorned. Marked from birth as flawed, her body a betrayal of the instincts that bound them all, she was the ghost in their midst, tolerated only for the labor she provided, mending hides by firelight, tending the frozen gardens that yielded little in this endless winter. The moon hung low, a silver sickle slicing the night sky, its light pooling on the snow like spilled milk. Lyria's fingers, numb from the cold, clutched the small silver pendant at her throat. A simple wolf's head etched with runes, its eyes twin moons. It was her secret anchor, a relic from a time before the humiliations piled like drifts against her door. She never spoke of its origin, for to do so would unravel the fragile veil she wore. The pack believed her orphaned, abandoned by some wandering rogue, but the truth burned hotter than the ritual flames crackling in the central pyre. 6 brothers, alphas of legend, scattered across rival territories, their blood the same fierce current that coursed through her veins. Kyle, the eldest at 34, with his storm-gray eyes and command over the northern storms. Ronan, 32, whose blade sang of unyielding justice. Darius, 30, the strategist whose mind wove alliances like spider silk. Elias, 28, healer of wounds both seen and unseen. Thorn, 26, the wild shadow who roamed the borderlands. And Lucian, the youngest at 24, whose fire-tempered heart guarded the eastern passes. They had vowed to protect her, to shield her from the world's cruelties, but distance and duty had kept them away. Until now, perhaps. A gust whipped snow into Lyria's face, stinging her cheeks like accusations. She rose slowly, her woolen shawl slipping from one shoulder, revealing the faint scars from past lessons in submission. The alpha of the pack, Garrick, loomed at the pyre's edge, his massive frame silhouetted against the dancing flames. His fur-trimmed mantle reeked of smoke and authority, but his gaze held no warmth, only the cold calculation of a leader who saw her as a liability. "You've no place here, Lyria," he growled, his voice rumbling like gravel under boots. "The Deusa demands strength, not sterility. Begone to the wilds before your curse taints our hunt." The pack murmured approval, their howls rising in a mocking symphony that drowned the wind. Lyria's heart pounded, a visceral drum against her ribs, the metallic tang of fear on her tongue. She had endured this ritual before, the shunning under the moon, where omegas proved their worth through scent and submission. But hers carried no fertile promise, only the hollow echo of what might have been. Tears froze on her lashes as she backed away, the snow crunching beneath her boots, each step a fracture in her resolve. The forest loomed, its branches clawing at the starless sky, promising exile in its icy embrace. Yet as she turned, a distant weevo pierced the night, not the pack's derision, but something primal, resonant. It came from the shadowed ridges where the mountains met the moon's pale glow, carrying the faint scent of blood and brotherhood. Lyria's pendant warmed against her skin, an unnatural heat blooming like a hidden flame. Her brothers, they were coming. She could feel it in the quickening of her pulse, the way the wind seemed to part for her, whispering secrets of reunion. But the pack pressed closer, their forms blurring in the swirling snow, Garrick's hand reaching to tear the pendant free. "No trinkets for the worthless!" he snarled, his claws glinting red in the firelight. Lyria dodged, her body moving on instinct, the cold fueling a spark of defiance she had long suppressed. She fled into the trees, the howls chasing her like wolves on the hunt, the moon her only witness. Deeper into the woods, the world narrowed to sensation, the bite of frost on her lungs, the snap of twigs underfoot, the relentless rhythm of her breath. Exile was no stranger, but tonight it felt like destiny's first cruel stroke. The pendant pulsed, a beacon in the dark, reminding her that rejection was but the forge for something unbreakable. Blood called to blood, and under this merciless moon the scorned Omega would rise, not alone, but with the fury of 6 kings at her side. The wind carried another Weevo, closer now, laced with thunder. They were near, and the pack, in their blindness, had no idea the storm they had unleashed. Lyria stumbled through the thickening veil of snow, her boots sinking into drifts that clutched like desperate hands. The forest's breath was a relentless gale, whipping flakes against her skin until it burned, raw and alive with the sting of survival. Each gasp drew in the sharp scent of pine and earth, mingled with the faint, coppery trace of her own fierce sweat. The pendant at her throat thrummed hotter now, an insistent pulse against her collarbone, as if it sought to guide her deeper into the wilds where the pack's howls faded to muffled echoes. Rejection had always been her shadow, but tonight it propelled her forward, a bitter wind at her back. The moon pierced the canopy in silver shards, illuminating twisted roots that snagged at her shawl, tearing it free to flutter like a surrendered flag. She pressed on, heart hammering a frantic rhythm until the ground sloped sharply downward into a narrow ravine. There, sheltered by overhanging cliffs of jagged ice, she collapsed against a boulder, her body racked with shivers that blurred the line between cold and sobs. The world narrowed to the ache in her chest, the hollow where belonging should have bloomed, now filled only with the pack's venomous scorn. Sterile, they called her, as if her blood were tainted, her spirit a barren field under eternal frost. But the pendant whispered otherwise, its runes glowing faintly in the lunar light, evoking memories of warm hands and solemn vows made in hidden glens. A crack echoed through the ravine, not the snap of a branch, but the unmistakable grind of stone under heavy paws. Lyria froze, her breath catching as a shadow detached from the tree line above. It moved with predatory grace, yet staggered, one limb dragging a dark smear across the snow. The scent hit her first, musk and iron, laced with the wild fury of storm winds. An alpha. Not of her pack, his aura was too vast, too commanding, rippling through the air like thunder trapped in flesh. Fear coiled in her gut, instinctive and primal, urging her to flee or submit. But curiosity flickered beneath it, a spark drawn to the pendant's heat, pulling her gaze upward. He emerged into the moonlight, Kyle, the eldest, though years and exile had etched lines of weariness into his storm-gray eyes. At 34, he was a colossus forged in northern tempests, his fur-lined cloak torn and bloodied, matted with the crimson evidence of battles fought in distant territories. A deep gash marred his shoulder, seeping through makeshift bandages, and his breath came in ragged bursts that fogged the air like dragon smoke. He was no stranger to wounds. His body bore the scars of rival packs and treacherous alliances. But this one carried a curse's weight. The flesh around it blackened as if scorched by unseen fire. cursed, perhaps, by the Deuce's wrath for duties unfulfilled, or by the betrayals that had kept him from her side. His eyes, sharp as flint, locked onto hers, recognition dawning like dawn over frozen peaks. "Lyria," he rasped, voice gravel rough from disuse and pain, sliding down the slope with a grunt. He collapsed a few paces away, his massive frame shuddering as he clutched his side. The air between them thickened, charged with the invisible threads of blood kinship, an instinctive pull that warred with her wariness. She should run. Alphas like him devoured the weak, or so the pack had taught her through bruises and barbs. Yet here he was, broken before her, his scent wrapping around her like a protective shroud, stirring memories of childhood games in hidden meadows, of promises etched under starlit skies. She edged closer despite herself, the snow muffling her steps, her fingers trembling as they hovered near his wound. Fear held her tongue, but curiosity loosened it. "Who? What are you?" she whispered, though deep down she knew. The pendant burned now, a brand of truth, confirming what exile had tried to erase. He was family, a king among wolves, felled by the very wars that had torn them apart. Cale's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability cracking his stoic mask, but denial flickered there too. The weight of his failures, the guilt of leaving her to this fate. "Your blood," he murmured, wincing as he shifted, the metallic tang of his blood sharpening the air. "The one we swore to shield. Forgive me, sister. The borders bled us dry, rival alphas, false oaths. But Ronan scented your distress on the winds. We're coming, all of us." His words hung heavy, laced with the melancholy of a leader haunted by duty's chains. The connection surged, unbidden, a warmth blooming in her chest, instinctive as the moon's tide, yet she resisted, rationalizing it as pity for a dying stranger. He was no savior yet, only a specter from a life she had buried under layers of scorn. The distant howls of the pack swelled again, closer, their pursuit a vengeful tide crashing through the woods. Cale's hand shot out, gripping her wrist, not harshly, but with the desperate strength of one clinging to redemption. His touch was fire against her cold skin, the pendant pulsing in sync with his faltering heartbeat. "Hide with me," he urged, eyes pleading beneath the pain. "They'll tear you apart before we can claim you." Empathy stirred uninvited, transforming fear into a fragile tether. She nodded, helping him drag himself into a crevice shadowed by ice-veined rock. Their bodies pressed close in the confined space. The wind howled outside, a guardian veil, as the first scouts of the pack crested the ridge above. In that breathless refuge, as snow sealed their hiding place like a tomb's embrace, Lyria felt the shift. Curiosity yielding to a bond reforged in secrecy. But doubt lingered, a whisper in her mind. What price would this reunion demand? The moon watched, silent arbiter, as brother and sister huddled against the storm, their shared blood a quiet defiance amid the gathering dark. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The crevice's icy walls pressed in like the jaws of some ancient beast, sealing Lyria and Cale in a world of muffled shadows and labored breaths. Snow sifted through the narrow opening above, dusting their huddled forms with a veil of white that clung to Cale's blood-matted fur like reluctant forgiveness. Lyria's heart thundered in her ears, a frantic counterpoint to the wind's savage wail outside, each gust carrying the pack's howls closer, predatory and unyielding, slicing through the night like claws through flesh. She could smell them now, the acrid musk of pursuit, mingled with the smoke of their torches, flickering orange against the frozen cliffs. Garrick's betas, no doubt, the enforcers who thrived on the weak's despair, their boots crunching snow into submission. Cale's grip on her wrist loosened, but his presence anchored her, a wall of heat and resolve amid the chill that seeped into her bones. His wound wept steadily, the dark stain spreading across his bandages, and she pressed her shawl against it, staunching the flow with trembling hands. The metallic tang of his blood filled the confined space, sharp and intimate, stirring something primal in her, a urge to protect, born not of duty, but of the blood they shared, thick as the frost binding the rocks. "Stay low," he whispered, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her, eyes scanning the sliver of sky visible through their shelter. Pain etched his features, deepening the lines of guilt that years of command had carved, but his gaze held hers with a fierce tenderness, as if she were the horizon he had chased through endless storms. She nodded, swallowing the knot of fear in her throat, her body curled against his side for warmth. The pendant at her neck pulsed in rhythm with his slowing breaths, its runes aglow with an inner fire that defied the cold, a beacon of their shared lineage, whispering of vows made under forgotten moons. How many nights had she clung to it alone, while the pack's taunts echoed in her ears? Useless. Barren. Now, in this tomb of ice, it felt alive, a thread pulling her from isolation's abyss. But doubt gnawed at her edges. Was this reunion salvation, or merely another chain? Cale, the eldest, the unyielding guardian, had left her to this fate once, duty to his territories pulling him away like the tide. Could she trust the empathy blooming in her chest, or was it just the instinct of a cornered Omega seeking any shelter from the storm? A shadow loomed at the ravine's edge, torchlight spilling down in erratic bursts, illuminating the scouts' snarling faces. Two betas, lithe and vicious, their cloaks whipping in the wind as they scanned the drifts below. "The scent's strong here," one growled, his voice carrying on the gale, nostrils flaring. "That wretched Omega can't have gone far. Garrick wants her head on a pike, traitor, running from the right." Their laughter grated like grinding ice, fueling the fire in Lyria's veins. She pressed closer to Cale, her free hand instinctively reaching for a jagged stone at her feet, its edges biting into her palm like a promise of defiance. Cale tensed, his free hand shifting to the hilt of a concealed dagger at his belt, the blade's pommel worn smooth from countless draws. "They won't find us," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear, carrying the faint scent of pine and distant thunder. "Not if we move as one." In that moment, the air between them thickened, charged with the raw electricity of survival. She met his eyes, seeing not the legendary alpha of whispered tales, the stormbringer who bent winds to his will, but a brother fractured by absence, his melancholy a mirror to her own scars. Empathy unfurled like a fragile bloom in frozen soil, transforming the instinctive pull into something deeper, a bond reforged in the crucible of shared peril, where fear yielded to fierce loyalty. The scouts descended, their steps deliberate, boots sinking into the snow with predatory caution. One paused mere feet from the crevice, his torch casting flickering shadows that danced across the ice like specters. Lyria's pulse roared, the cold amplifying every sensation, the rough texture of Cale's cloak against her skin, the coppery warmth of his blood seeping through the shawl, the distant uivo of more pursuers echoing from the ridge. She could almost taste their intent, the pack's justice, swift and merciless, erasing her existence as easily as a footprint in the snow. But Cale moved first, silent as a shadow, his body shielding hers as he hurled the stone she had gripped. It arced through the air, striking the torch from the beta's hand with a crack that splintered the night. Flames hissed into the snow, extinguished in a burst of steam, plunging the ravine into moonlit gloom. Chaos erupted. The scouts whirled, snarls ripping from their throats as they lunged toward the sound. Cale exploded from the crevice, a blur of fury and grace, his dagger flashing silver in the lunar light. He met the first beta mid-stride, blade sinking into furred shoulder with a wet thud, blood spraying across the white expanse like crimson petals. The second circled, claws extended, but Lyria surged forward unbidden, her omega instincts twisting into something feral. She grabbed a fallen branch, heavy with ice, and swung it with all the pent-up rage of years scorned. It connected with the beta's knee, eliciting a howl of agony that reverberated off the cliffs. Together, they fought, not as lone souls, but as a unit, their movements sinking in the dance of blood and survival. Kale's strikes were precise, tempered by the ethics of a king who slew only what threatened his own. Lyria's were desperate, fueled by the raw ache of rejection turned to resolve. The betas fell, one crumpling into the snow with a gurgling sigh, the other fleeing into the trees, his cries summoning the pack's full wrath. Panting, Kale pulled her back into the crevice, his arm around her shoulders, a protective barrier as distant howls swelled like an incoming tide. In the aftermath, as adrenaline ebbed and the cold reclaimed its bite, Lyria leaned against him, her body trembling, not from fear, but from the warmth of connection solidified in violence. The pendant cooled against her skin, its glow fading like embers, but the bond it symbolized burned brighter. Kale's hand found hers, calloused fingers intertwining with her own, his touch conveying the guilt he carried like a crown of thorns. "I failed you once," he admitted, voice thick with the weight of unspoken apologies, eyes reflecting the moon's sorrowful light. "But no more. Your strength. It's the fire we all need." She squeezed his hand, the empathy now a tether unbreakable, weaving their wounds into shared resilience. Yet as the pack's torches crested the ridge, a dilemma stirred in her soul. To embrace this brotherhood meant war, a storm that could shatter the fragile world she knew. What was redemption, if not choosing family over the ghosts of isolation? The wind howled its challenge, and under the moon's unblinking gaze, Lyria felt the first stirrings of her own power awakening, a hidden gift waiting to be revealed in the blood-soaked snow. The snow-laden wind clawed at the crevice's mouth, sealing the world outside into a frenzy of howls and flickering torchlight. But within, time slowed to the rhythm of shared breaths. Lyria's fingers still trembled from the branch's weight, slick with the beta's blood that now stained the snow beyond like accusations etched in red. Her body ached, not from the cold's relentless bite, but from the surge of something ancient stirring in her veins, a warmth that bloomed from the pendant's core, spreading through her like moonlight-piercing storm clouds. Kyle slumped against the ice-veined wall, his chest heaving, the dagger limp in his grip as the last echoes of combat faded into the gale. His eyes, storm-gray and shadowed by pain, searched hers, holding a mix of pride and unspoken fear, as if he glimpsed the fracture in her fragile armor. The pendant burned against her skin, hotter than before, its runes pulsing with an ethereal glow that cast faint silver patterns on the crevice's walls, like veins of starlight in frozen stone. Lyria gasped, clutching it instinctively, the metal searing yet soothing, as visions flooded her mind unbidden. Flashes of shadowed paths through endless forests, whispers of hidden trails that wove between rival territories, guiding the lost to safety or the hunted to ambush. It was no mere trinket, it was a key, forged in the blood of their lineage, awakening now under the moon's insistent gaze. Her hidden gift, the Pathfinder's sight, long dormant beneath layers of scorn and self-doubt, unfurled like a banner in the wind. She saw it clearly, the pack's torches converging from 3 ridges, their paths a tangled web of pursuit. But beyond them, a narrow pass cloaked in mist, leading to the eastern borders where Ronan and the others waited, their scents carried on phantom breezes. "Kale," she whispered, her voice threading through the confined space like a revelation, eyes wide with the weight of what she beheld. The air thickened with the scent of pine and blood, mingled with the faint ozone tang of awakening power, as if the Deusa herself exhaled into the frost. Her hands moved of their own accord, tracing invisible lines in the air, mapping the unseen currents that bound the wilds. "They're coming. Garrick's full force, splitting to flank us. But there's a way. A hidden vein through the cliffs where the river's frozen breath hides the trail. It leads to the old standing stones, where the winds part for kin." He stared, his breath catching, the guilt in his gaze fracturing into awe. At 34, Cale had bent storms to his will, forged alliances in the fires of betrayal. Yet here, in the dim glow of her pendant, he saw the truth he had long suspected but dared not claim. Lyria was no barren curse, no worthless shadow cast by the pack's cruelty. She was the keystone of their destiny, the Omega whose blood wove the threads of fate for 6 scattered kings. The Pathfinder's gift, whispered in ancient lore as the Deuce's favor to the Forsaken, allowed her to sense the ley lines of the earth, the spiritual veins that pulsed with lunar energy, revealing paths of power and peril. It was why their mother had hidden her among the scornful pack, to shield her from those who would exploit such sight for conquest. But exile had nearly extinguished it, buried under humiliations that convinced her she was empty, devoid of purpose. You see it," Kyle murmured, his voice rough with wonder and the sharp edge of regret, reaching out to touch the pendant lightly, his calloused fingers brushing hers. The contact ignited a spark, visions sharpening in her mind, not just escape, but glimpses of the brothers' plights, Ronan's blade clashing with eastern raiders under a blood moon, Darius unraveling a traitor's web in shadowed councils, Elias mending wounds in a cavern lit by healing flames. They were all bound to her, their fates intersecting at this frozen crossroads, her gift the compass to unite them against the gathering wars. Yet with the sight came a moral ache, a dilemma coiling in her chest like frostbite's burn. To embrace this power meant wielding it for redemption or ruin, guiding her brothers to glory or dragging innocence into the storm of vengeance. The howls swelled outside, closer now, the pack's fury a visceral thunder that vibrated through the ice, carrying the stench of smoke and sweat-soaked fur. Garrick's voice boomed over the gale. A command laced with rage. "Flush them out! The Omega's scent fades, but her blood will paint the snow." Torches crested the ridge, their flames whipping like angry serpents, casting elongated shadows that clawed at the crevice. Lyria's heart pounded, the pendant's heat surging in response, illuminating the hidden path in her vision, a treacherous climb veiled by avalanching drifts, but one that sang of freedom, of rebirth from the ashes of rejection. Cale rose unsteadily, pulling her with him, his arm a steady anchor around her waist, the warmth of his body a counterpoint to the encroaching cold. "Lead us, sister," he said, his tone laced with the melancholy of a king who had wandered too long in guilt's shadow. "You've been the light we lost. The Deusa chose you not for weakness, but to heal what duty broke." His words struck deep, stirring the romantic tragedy of their bond. Not a swift flame, but a slow burn forged in shared suffering, resisted by her rational fears of betrayal, yet accepted in this moment of visceral truth. The gift manifested fully now, her senses expanding. She felt the earth's pulse beneath the snow, the moon's silver thread pulling her forward, the blood ties that made her indispensable. They moved as one, slipping from the crevice into the blizzard's embrace, Lyria's steps guided by the pendant's glow, which she concealed beneath her torn shawl. The wind tore at them, snow stinging like needles, but she navigated the veiled pass with instinctive grace, her hand outstretched as if parting invisible curtains. Cale followed, his wound protesting with each stride, yet his eyes never left her, realization dawning that she was the redemption he sought, the key to mending the fractures in their brotherhood, to turning exile into empire. But as the standing stones loomed in the distance, ancient sentinels etched with lunar runes, A deeper question gnawed at her soul. Was this power a crown of compassion or a weapon that demanded war? The pack's pursuit thundered behind, blood and fire under the moon, forcing the choice ever nearer. In the heart of the storm, Lyria felt the weight of destiny settle, not as chains, but as wings unfurling in the night. Her gift was no curse, but a call to rise, to heal the wounds of kings with the mercy of the forsaken. Yet mercy came at a cost, and as the first stones pierced the veil, she wondered if freedom meant forgiving the pack's sins or avenging them in blood. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your... The standing stones rose like ancient teeth gnashing at the storm-swept sky, their surfaces etched with runes that caught the moon's fractured light, pulsing in rhythm with the pendant's insistent throb against Lyria's chest. Snow lashed her face in horizontal sheets, each flake a tiny blade honed by the wind's fury. But she pressed onward, her steps guided by the Pathfinder's vision, a luminous thread weaving through the chaos, parting the drifts to reveal the sacred circle at the heart of the pass. Kale limped beside her, his arm a heavy anchor around her shoulders, his breath ragged and hot against the nape of her neck, carrying the mingled sense of blood and unyielding resolve. The wound at his side had clotted under her makeshift binding, but fever burned in his veins, turning his skin slick and feverish beneath the cloak. The stones. They're a crossroads, he murmured, voice strained like frayed rope, eyes fixed on the looming monoliths. Where blood oaths are sealed or shattered, Ronan will meet us there. His territory borders this vein. Lyria's heart clenched. A visceral twist of anticipation and dread as the vision sharpened in her mind's eye. Not just paths, but echoes of betrayal, shadows of faces twisted in false loyalty. The pack's pursuit thundered behind them, a relentless wave of howls and snapping branches, Garrick's roar cutting through the gale like a challenge from the Dusa herself. Her gift revealed their formation, flanking from the western ridge, led by Mira, the beta whose mocking barbs had scarred deeper than claws. But deeper still, a traitor lurked in the weave. One of Garrick's inner circle, whose scent tangled with the eastern winds, whispering of alliances sold to rival alphas beyond the mountains. Freedom or vengeance? The question coiled in her gut like frostbite's slow fire. Her sterile blood no longer a curse, but a catalyst, demanding she choose between the mercy that might heal her fractured soul or the war that would forge it in blood. They breached the circle as lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the stones in stark silver, their shadows stretching like claws across the trampled snow. At the center stood Ronan, 32, and forged in the crucible of border skirmishes, his broad frame silhouetted against a small pyre of crackling branches, flames licking the air with defiant warmth. His blade rested across his knees, its edge gleaming red from recent kills, and his eyes, dark as midnight rivers, flared with recognition as they approached. "Kyle," he growled, rising in a fluid motion, snow shedding from his furred pauldrons like discarded doubts. But his gaze locked on Lyria, softening into something raw, almost reverent, as the pendant's glow reflected in his pupils. "And the light we lost. The winds carried your scent, sister, distress like a storm breaking." Before she could respond, the air split with weavos from the tree line, Darius and Elias emerging from the mist-shrouded east, their forms ghosts in the blizzard. Darius, 30 and sharp as a raven's wing, scanned the horizons with a strategist's cold precision, his cloak embroidered with maps of forgotten territories. Elias, 28, bore the healer's satchel slung low, his gentle hands already reaching for Kale's wound, eyes shadowed by the guilt of healers who mended too late. "The pack closes in," Darius said, voice calm yet edged with steel, as if plotting moves on an invisible board. "Garrick's no fool. He's called reinforcements from the southern clans. But your sight, Lyria, it parts the veil. Show us." She nodded, the pendant searing now, visions cascading. The packs advance, a traitor among them, Joren, Garrick's second, whose false oaths reeked of ambition, selling secrets to a rival alpha named Varric, whose shadow loomed from the frozen peaks, hungry for their unified blood. Thorn and Lucienne were en route from the borders, their scents faint but fierce, drawn by the lunar call. Her brothers encircled her, a wall of muscle and melancholy, each marked by duty's toll. Kale's storm-worn frame, Ronan's scarred fists, Darius's calculating gaze, Elias's quiet sorrow. They were kings in exile, ethical hearts burdened by the wars that had sundered their family, leaving her to the pack's cruelty. Love for them stirred, not as instant flame, but a resisted tide, rationalized as survival's necessity, yet pulling her toward acceptance amid the gathering peril. The confrontation erupted without warning. Garrick burst from the western flank, his massive form barreling through the snow, flanked by Mira and a dozen betas, their torches blazing like vengeful stars. Joren trailed at his side, eyes darting with feigned loyalty, but Lyria's gift exposed him. The traitor's scent, a sour thread amid the pack's musk. "The sterile wretch and her delusions," Garrick bellowed, voice booming over the wind, claws extended as he charged the circle. His eyes burned with the alpha rival's arrogance, blind to the brother's arrival, seeing only the omega he had scorned. "You'll die in these stones. Lyria, your blood to appease the Deusa for your curse." Battle ignited in a visceral storm. Ronan met Garrick head-on, blades clashing with sparks that lit the snow in fleeting gold, the air thick with the metallic tang of drawn steel and the earthy reek of exertion. Kale, despite his fever, lunged at the betas, his movements a thunderous blur, felling two with sweeps that sprayed crimson arcs across the white. Darius directed from the shadows, his commands weaving strategy like silk, while Elias shielded Lyria, his healer's hands now wielding a staff etched with lunar sigils, cracking bone with merciful precision. Thorn and Lucienne's distant howls joined the fray, their arrival a promised reinforcement. But the circle became a maelstrom of fire and blood under the moon, torches guttering in the wind, flames hissing as snow quenched them, Weavos mingling with grunts of pain. Lyria stood at the center, the pendant a blazing sun against her skin, her visions fracturing into commands. "Flank left! Joren betrays!" she cried, voice cutting through the chaos, guiding Ronan's strike that exposed the traitor's flank. Joren whirled, snarl twisting into panic, lunging at her with desperate claws, but Elias intercepted, the impact sending them tumbling into the snow, blood blooming like dark roses. Garrick roared, breaking through to tower over her, his breath hot and foul, eyes gleaming with the madness of a rival's pact, Varric's influence, promising power in exchange for her death. "Useless Omega," he spat, hand closing around her throat, the pressure a crushing reminder of years of humiliation, the pack's jeers echoing in her mind like ghosts. In that vice of past and present, the moral choice crystallized, sharp as shattered ice. Forgiveness? To spare Garrick, to reveal the traitor's web and end the cycle with mercy. Choosing love's fragile freedom over war's bloody crown. Or vengeance, unleashing her brother's full fury, her gift as a weapon to drown the pack in retribution, binding her to the throne of reclaimed power. Her hand closed over the pendant, its heat flooding her veins, the moon's light bathing the stones in ethereal blue. Kale's cry pulled her from the brink. "Lyria, choose," his eyes pleading for the compassion that could redeem them all, not as conquerors, but as kin healed by her light. She twisted free, not with claws, but with words forged in the forge of suffering. "Joren sold us to Varric. Your ally is the curse." Garrick faltered, gaze whipping to his second, who scrambled back, exposed and snarling. The pack wavered. confusion rippling through their ranks like cracks in frozen earth. Lyria's heart tore, the dilemma a spiritual wound. Mercy might free her from hatred's chains, allowing rebirth in brotherhood's embrace. But war whispered of justice, of proving her worth in blood's red proof. As Thorn and Lucian crested the ridge, their forms shadows of wild fury, the choice hung suspended, a ethical precipice under the indifferent moon. What was strength, if not choosing between the fire of forgiveness and the storm of righteous wrath? The wind howled its demand, blood pooling at her feet as destiny waited for her verdict. The standing stones trembled under the onslaught of the storm, their ancient runes flaring like veins of captured lightning as the clash of steel and fang rent the night. Blood slicked the snow in ragged patterns, steaming where it met the pyre's defiant flames, and the air hung heavy with the iron reek of wounds torn open, mingling with the acrid bite of sweat and scorched fur. Lyria's throat burned from Garrick's grip, his claws pricking her skin like thorns of remembered scorn. But her words had pierced deeper, the revelation of Joran's treachery hanging in the gale like a severed thread. Garrick's eyes, wild with the fury of a cornered beast, flicked to his second, who crouched amid the fray, lips curled in a snarl that betrayed the rot within. The pack faltered, their howls fracturing into confused growls, torches sputtering as doubt seeped into their ranks like meltwater through cracks in ice. Lyria wrenched free, the pendant scorching her palm as she clutched it, its twin moon eyes blazing with the full force of her awakened sight. Visions cascaded through her. Joren's clandestine meetings under shadowed eaves, whispers of alliance with Varric. The rival Alpha whose ambition clawed at the borders like a winter blight. Varric, a specter from the frozen peaks, his coat as black as eclipsed night, promising Garrick dominion over unified territories in exchange for silencing the sterile curse that bound the six brothers. But it was all illusion. Varric sought to fracture them further, to claim Lyria's gift as his own weapon, twisting paths of fate into snares for conquest. The moral precipice yawned beneath her, sharp and unforgiving. Forgiveness, a path of love that might grant her brother's freedom from endless war, weaving mercy into the blood ties that defined them. Or war, unleashing the storm of retribution. Her Pathfinder's vision as a blade to carve justice from the pack's betrayals, binding her to a throne stained red. Garrick lunged again, his massive frame barreling through the swirling snow, but Ronan intercepted, their bodies colliding with a thunderous impact that shook the stones. Blades locked in a screech of metal, sparks flying like fallen stars, Ronan's scarred face twisted in ethical rage, the justice he wielded not for glory, but for the kin he had failed to protect. "You mocked what you couldn't break," Ronan snarled, his voice a low thunder over the wind, driving Garrick back with a sweep that gashed his flank, blood blooming dark against white fur. Cale circled the edge, his fevered movements a shadow of his former storm, felling betas with calculated strikes that spared the young and coerced, his melancholy gaze flickering to Lyria, a silent plea for the compassion that could redeem his guilt-ridden soul. Darius orchestrated from the pyre's glow, his strategist's mind unraveling the pack's formation, exposing flanks where Thorn and Lucian now crashed into the melee, the wild border guard and fire-hearted eastern sentinel adding their fury like gales converging. Joran bolted from the chaos, his betrayal laid bare, scrambling toward the eastern tree line where Varric's scouts lurked in the mist, shadowy forms with eyes like coals, their allegiance a poison seeping from the peaks. Lyria's gift surged, the pendant a lodestone pulling her forward, revealing the traitor's path. A hidden vein through the underbrush, laced with the rival's scent, leading to an ambush that could shatter her brother's unity. "He's fleeing to Varric," she cried, her voice cutting through the din like moonlight on steel, the words a visceral release of years pent in silence. The pack turned on Joran then, confusion erupting into snarls and claws. betas tearing at their former ally in a frenzy of misplaced loyalty, turned inward. Garrick roared, staggering from Ronan's assault, his eyes locking on Lyria, not with hatred alone, but a dawning horror. The realization that her uselessness had been the veil hiding a power that could unmake him. Elias pulled her back toward the stone's center, his healer's hands gentle yet firm, the air around him shimmering with lunar sigils that warded off stray strikes. "Choose, Lyria," he urged, his voice soft as falling snow, eyes shadowed by the sorrow of one who had mended too many fractures born of pride. Mercy could end this, expose Varric's web, let the pack fracture from within, or command us to war, and we'll drown them in blood for every tear you shed. The dilemma clawed at her heart, a spiritual fire amid the cold. Love, in the form of forgiveness, offered rebirth, a freedom where she walked unbound by vengeance, her gift healing the wounds of exile rather than avenging them. Yet war tempted with the raw proof of her worth, the pack's humiliations repaid in the currency of power, her brother's ethical burdens lifted by the catharsis of conquest. The moon hung low, its silver gaze impartial, illuminating the bloodied snow where fallen betas gasped their last, the wind carrying their final breaths like prayers unanswered. Varric emerged then from the mist, a colossal shadow detaching from the trees, his black fur dusted with frost, eyes burning with the hunger of a king who saw only thrones to claim. "The sterile Omega," he rumbled, voice like grinding glaciers, circling the stones with predatory grace, his scouts fanning out to encircle the fray. "Your brother's blood is mine by right, your gift, the key to paths unchallenged." Garrick whirled toward him, alliance crumbling in the face of exposure, but Varric struck first, claws raking the air in a blur that sent Garrick sprawling, blood spraying in an arc that painted the runes red. The rival Alpha's presence amplified the chaos, his aura a suffocating weight that pressed on Lyria's senses, her pendant flaring in defiance, visions fracturing into a web of possible futures. Mercy scattering the packs into wary peace, or war forging an empire from their ashes, but at the cost of her soul's quiet. Thorn and Lucian closed ranks around her, their wild energies a whirlwind of snarls and strikes, felling Varric's scouts with the ferocity of guardians long denied their charge. Kyle joined them, his hand finding her shoulder, the touch a bridge of shared guilt and hope, his storm-gray eyes reflecting the moon's sorrow. "What is strength, if not choosing mercy over the blade?" he whispered. The words a philosophy etched in his weary frame, urging her toward the light of redemption. But the pack's remnants rallied behind Garrick, who rose snarling, torn between old hatred and new betrayal, while Varric advanced, his gaze fixed on the pendant like a thief eyeing treasure. Lyria stepped forward, the snow yielding beneath her as if the earth itself bowed to her resolve, the pendant's heat flooding her veins with liquid silver. The choice crystallized in that heartbeat. Forgiveness, not as weakness, but as the ultimate freedom, exposing the webs of deceit to shatter the cycles of war, allowing her brother's love to heal rather than conquer. "Enough," she declared, voice resonant with the Deusa's echo, her gift weaving a vision outward, projected like moonlight on water, paths of truth illuminating Joran's flight, Varric's hidden forces, Garrick's coerced pacts. The packs recoiled, the revelation a spiritual thunderclap, forcing confrontations not of fang, but of fractured oaths. Garrick knelt in the bloodied snow, his arrogance crumbling into despair, while Varric snarled, retreating into the storm as his advantage dissolved. Yet as the winds howled their verdict, Lyria felt the cost etch into her spirit, a war averted, but the shadows of doubt lingering, whispering if mercy truly freed or merely delayed the blood moon's call. Her brothers gathered close, their presences a tapestry of redemption. But the ethical wound pulsed. In choosing love, had she claimed her power or surrendered it to the ghosts of the past? The stones stood silent witness, the moon's light pooling like tears on the crimson snow, as destiny's fragile peace hung in the balance. The standing stones loomed eternal in the storm's aftermath, their runes dimming like embers swallowed by frost, as the wind's howl softened to a mournful sigh carrying the scent of blood and thawing earth. Lyria stood at the circle's heart, the pendant's glow fading against her chest, its warmth ebbing like a tide retreating from jagged shores. The snow around her was a canvas of crimson strokes, Garrick's form slumped against a monolith, his breaths ragged and shallow, eyes hollowed by the revelation that had stripped him bare. Varric had vanished into the mist-shrouded peaks, his scouts scattering like shadows before dawn, their ambitious webs unraveled by the silver truth of her vision. Jaren lay still in the drifts, his betrayal's price paid in the pack's vengeful claws, a silent testament to the fragility of false oaths. The air hung heavy with the copper tang of spilled life, mingled with the smoky residue of the pyre, now reduced to glowing coals that hissed against the settling flakes. Her brothers encircled her, a living fortress of furred cloaks and weary frames, their presences a symphony of textures. Kyle's storm-scented heat at her side, Ronan's blade-calloused hand brushing her arm, Darius's calculating gaze softened by quiet awe, Elias's healing touch lingering on her shoulder, Thorn's wild border winds ruffling her hair, Lucian's fire-tempered warmth radiating like a hearth in winter's grasp. At 22, Lyria had been the forsaken Omega, her sterility a branded shame that the pack had wielded like a whip, each humiliation a lash etching doubt into her soul. But now, under the moon's compassionate gaze, a full orb cresting the clouds, bathing the scene in pearlescent blue, their blood called to hers, weaving rejection into the tapestry of Renascimento. The Pathfinder's gift pulsed faintly within her, not as a weapon seized in war's frenzy, but as a balm, revealing paths not of conquest, but of mending, hidden glens where exiles could find sanctuary, ley lines that bound fractured kin rather than divide foes. Garrick stirred, his massive chest heaving. The Alpha's arrogance fractured into something raw, almost human, a king dethroned by his own blindness. "Mercy. From the Barren One," he rasped, voice gravel ground under the weight of defeat, blood bubbling at his lips as he met her eyes. The pack's remnants knelt in the snow, their howls silenced, faces etched with the spiritual ache of truths laid bare. Mira, the beta whose barbs had drawn first blood on Lyria's spirit, averted her gaze, tears freezing on her lashes like jewels of regret. The choice Lyria had made, forgiveness over the blade's red verdict, hung in the air like the moon's own breath, a sacrifice of vengeance that freed her from hatred's chains, yet carved a deeper wound. The ghosts of endured scorn whispering if compassion was strength or surrender. What was redemption, if not yielding the throne of retribution to claim one of quiet union? Cale knelt beside Garrick, his storm-gray eyes reflecting the ethical melancholy that had haunted him through years of border wars, his hand pressing Elias's poultice to the fallen Alpha's gashes. "The Deusa weaves no curses without purpose," Kyle murmured, voice thick with the guilt of a brother who had left her to this forge of suffering. "Lyria's sight shows us not empires built on blood, but alliances born of mercy. Varric's shadow retreats, but the paths ahead demand we heal, not conquer." The words stirred the air, philosophy etched in the frost, as Elias worked his lunar sigils, faint glows mending flesh with threads of silver light. Ronan sheathed his blade, the justice in his frame yielding to a deeper ethic, while Darius traced new maps in the snow, his mind already charting reunions that could unite territories long sundered by rivalry. Thorn and Lucienne flanked the circle's edge, their wild and fiery essences a guard against lingering threats, yet their gazes on Lyria held the resisted bloom of familial love, rationalized once as duty, now accepted as the redemptive force that bound them. Lyria stepped forward, the snow yielding softly beneath her boots, the pendant cool now against her skin, its runes a subtle reminder of the blood that had awakened it. She knelt before Garrick, her hand hovering near his scarred muzzle, the touch tentative yet profound, a bridge across the chasm of rejection. The wind whispered through the stones, carrying distant weavos that echoed not defiance, but harmony, as if the wilds themselves acknowledged the shift. "I choose union," she said, her voice resonant with the visceral emotion of rebirth, tears tracing warm paths down her chilled cheeks. "Not as your scorned shadow, but as the one who sees the paths to peace. Forgive as I forgive. Let this blood be the last spilled under false moons." Garrick's eyes met hers, the Alpha's pride crumbling into a nod, raw and unadorned, the pack rising slowly to affirm the pact, their scents mingling in tentative accord. The moon crested higher, its light pooling on the snow like liquid silver, illuminating the brothers' faces, each marked by the melancholy of kings who had wandered in guilt's exile, now cured by her mercy's quiet power. Sacrifice had come not in death, but in the yielding of war's allure, birthing a union where her gift guided them toward destinies intertwined, territories healed, alliances forged in the fire of compassion rather than conquest. Faith had triumphed over despair, her sterile blood no barren curse, but the fertile soil from which redemption bloomed, proving that every Omega's wound could crown the Alphas who learned to kneel. The wind softened to a caress, the pyre's embers flaring one last time, casting golden flickers on their forms as the storm retreated, leaving silence broken only by the steady rhythm of breaths sinking as one. In that lunar embrace, Lyria felt the Renascimento settle into her bones, a spiritual fire that warmed the eternal cold, transforming the rejected into the revered. Her brothers drew her close, their arms a circle of unbreakable warmth, the pendant's twin moons reflecting the Deusa's smile. Blood, fire, and moon had borne witness. Love was the proof of healing, the choice that turned tragedy to triumph. And under the vast, star-pricked sky, the forsaken Omega rose, not alone, but as the heart of 6 kings, their shared destiny a flame enduring against the winter's grasp. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.